then you can't apply that analogy, especially when it comes to organisms and species. Yeah? However, what is interesting, if you apply that analogy to the universe, it works for the initial conditions of the universe. That's why the fine-tuning of the universe for existence is a big problem for the atheist. This is why many atheist physicists are saying, we have big issues here, because there's metaphysical claims to this fine-tuning, and this is why Richard Dawkins, on the same page, 157 to 158, in his book, he says, it's like scripture, isn't it? They're referring to it. He says in his book that basically we have an explanation for the origin of species, but we don't have one for the physical universe. We need to wait, yeah? Because I believe science doesn't even answer, just like almost some kind of blind faith approach. Yeah? But anyway, to cut a long story short, if we use the analogy of fine-tuning, it's much more effective, because you have an issue here. You have constants of fine-tuning of the universe. That if they were to change by hair's breadth, we wouldn't have the life-permitting universe. So there's three possible explanations: physical necessity, chance of design, and as you heard from my discussion, that the inference, the best explanation is that it's design, which is good based upon the probability. And you heard the kind of joke of chance, the kind of things that we're talking about. However, what we have to understand, though, even from an evolutionary point of view, recently Richard Dawkins did something amazing. And I thought it was one of the most amazing statements coming out from Richard Dawkins, right? And someone asked him in the documentary very clearly, look, evolution itself seems to have some kind of designer though. Because the process, there's something, maybe it wasn't designed in the beginning, but someone designer must have jumped in somehow and just put something together. And his works are indicating this. But this is how he explained it. And listen to the joke. He said, drum roll, right? He said, it must have been aliens. I'm telling you, he said this. He said it was aliens. They came here, gave us the first mitochondria, or the first living cell, or they placed on a meteorite and guided it to Earth. I'm telling you, he said this, yeah? If you don't believe me, go to Sheikh YouTube. Go to Sheikh YouTube and type in Richard Dawkins' Evolution and documentary, and you see in his clear terms, without him openly discussing this, right? So that's an interesting point. I'm not saying I don't mind the evolutionary argument, it doesn't, but I just thought we should have a laugh, it's been a bit too serious. Yeah?
That doesn't mean that aliens don't exist. It doesn't mean that he maybe was joking.
Yeah, that's fine. So we can have a debate next week. You have to understand is that the argument I gave with the fine-tuning of the universe, evolution doesn't have a foot in the door. It's about 8 billion years away. It doesn't have a say in this argument. You can't use evolution to justify the fine-tuning of the universe and initial constants in order to permit our existence. Evolution is 8 billion years away from this perspective. So that's a different argument. It doesn't undercut the very argument.
Nature is well.
Yeah, it doesn't undercut the argument. So the fine-tuning argument is a very, very, very key argument, which we didn't hear any rebuttals to it today, any key rebuttals rebutting the premises.
Man and white.
So just to clarify, does that mean you think the analogy fits for the kind of moment of the universe being created, but you don't think it fits for DNA in the process of evolution? Is that correct? The intelligent design of the...
Well, it depends how you see the analogy. If you see it as like an instant, and after you got all this stuff, then it doesn't work, because evolution, as we see from a scientific perspective, it didn't happen that way. You just have the first cell, and after a few minutes, bang, you have human beings. That wasn't the case. No, but if you use the analogy from a chance perspective, from probability, then yeah, it's consistent. But it depends how you use the analogy. But my argument is, this is relevant to my second argument, which was about the fine-tuning of the universe to permit our existence. Evolution doesn't have a foot in the door. That's my point.
But I guess what I mean is that, do you subscribe to the theory of evolution? Do you think the complexity of the DNA or cell can be explained in terms of the intelligent design argument? So like take the analogy of the clock. Do you think that fits the process of evolution, or do you think evolution can be explained? Yeah, I guess I'm asking.
Evolution.
Are you kind of arguing in favour of this kind of intelligent design, in the sense that the universe was created by an intelligent design, and then all the natural processes that
sound like
in the universe?
Oh no, I'm not.
Are you arguing for that, or are you arguing?
No, I'm not. I mean, see, it's very interesting. All we need to understand is that evolution as an explanation is a decent explanation from a scientific naturalistic perspective. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm just saying if we see it scientifically, then we see from a naturalistic perspective, it's okay. It's got its holes. For example, if we read the works by Dr. Behe, who wrote a book called The Edge of Evolution, it's a very good book, and he's saying we've still got problems with random mutation. And he's got a big problem. He said evolution has an edge. It works from a micro perspective within species, but not across species, which is really in line with the Quranic view anyway. But that's a different discussion. I would disagree with evolution based on the methodological perspective, on the philosophy of science and the philosophy of religion. Because essentially, if we study the philosophy of science, what we see is that it's a speculative methodology. Well, when we come to conclusions about revelation itself, we say it's less speculative, or what we would say in Arabic, ilm al-qati, it's the definite knowledge, and scientific knowledge is ilm al-dhann, which is the knowledge of speculation. So just from a methodological perspective, it just outweighs itself. But if we jump into the paradigm of scientific naturalism and science, then yeah, it's a decent explanation. But there's other great explanations. We see the philosopher whose works, William Dembski. He talks about something called specified design, I think he's talking about. He's saying it's not only improbability, but it conforms to an independent pattern, to a specified pattern. And that's why he's posing a case for intelligent design. But it's all useful to discuss.
But the whole rationality of the kind of scientific method is subject to evidence and discussion and stuff.
Yeah. Well, so is my ideas. That's what we're discussing today. I mean, why is everyone assuming that just because I give an idea, I'm not going to discuss it? I think we discussed it very well. I mean, that's an assumption.
If it was proven wrong, would you be willing to accept that? Like, that would have very serious repercussions.
If my main premises were proven wrong,
if empirically we could find.
But you see, there's a trick question in your question that you probably don't know it's a trick, but let me give you the trick. Use the word empirical. Yeah, are you assuming that's the only way to form conclusions about life? And we've already discussed that. That's not the case. Do you see?
But
that's the thing.
Then you're arguing something that's infallible then, on logical grounds.
No, we're not, because you could find out if my argument is sound or valid. Do you see? You can still find out if it's sound or valid. But the problem I'm trying to portray here is that even as students in the West, students in Britain, when we learn science, I studied science, we need to read about the philosophy of science, because what we do, we adopt it and we think it's like the gospel truth almost. And it's the reference point for everything. That's not true. The philosophers of science, let me tell you, the philosophers of science, read the philosophy of science, it will really enlighten everybody. Yeah? And you see how in some instances it's a methodology confined to a specific sphere. So we can't use it to answer everything. That's my point. So when we say it's empirically proven, we're assuming that's the only way to form conclusions, and that's not. That's my point.
Yes. Can we read from the top? No? Yes. Man and friend.
This is directed at Hamza. I was just wondering whether, because you say morals transcend human subjectivity and they come from the God or divine. Are morals good because God says they are, or are they inherently good on their own?
Neither. It's a false dilemma. This is Plato's dilemma. It's called the threefold dilemma. And the way we break the dilemma is by saying that that his commands come from his nature. Okay? And then we say God is good. Then you say, well, how do you know God is good? We say, look, think about this. If God is the being most worthy of worship, then the being most worthy of worship is the highest moral being. And then we'll just stop as an explanation, because you can go ad infinitum to explanations. But that is the best explanation for objective morals. That's my point. If you take that away, then you don't have any objective morals. Because remember, the argument is an axiomatic argument. It starts by addressing that there is such a thing as objective morals. So if that's the case, then we're justifying it somehow, yeah? And we can't justify it by all the other views. So the best view, which is in my opinion, according to the definition of objectivity that I gave, was that you need God because he's the only conceptual anchor to human objectivity. Then you have Plato's dilemma, also known as the threefold dilemma, which poses a problem. I think it's a false dilemma, and I think the way you read it is the way I've just described. The chair's not here. Well, when you come down, the time is right.
I'll need temporary chair. Okay, last. Bob, do you want to say anything?
Obviously, in a sense, it's not a dilemma for me, but you obviously find another way of breaking it is say God doesn't have anything to do with it, and in a sense, I'm going to think that that's the more parsimonious solution, but obviously it's not really a dilemma for the atheist. I do think that it is a genuine dilemma, though. I think it raises a profound issue, and I think do you want to tell me how you phrased your way out of it so that I don't misattribute it this time? God by his nature is producing it's in his nature to be good.
Oh, we're saying that his commands come from his being, and we believe he's a good being. You can pose the question, well, how do you know he's good in the first place? Yeah. But the way to address that is to say, well, you can't have an ad infinitum self-explanation. Because what we're trying to do is explain objective morality. That's the point. And also, what I was saying is that the being most worthy of worship is the being that's the most highly moral being.
So, it's not a dilemma addressed to the atheist, but I think that, in a way, it is dancing on the head of a pin kind of philosophy. It's designed to pick up a sort of fault in this concept of God. As described in the statement, I think that what it is to be rational is to leave things open to criticism. And I think that the kind of manoeuvre we have to make, the kind of thing that is done by theologians, is to sort of define God in such a way that he's good, so therefore whatever he says, and therefore nothing works. Which I think it's coherent in itself as a logical thing. It's just that we have no reason to think that it's the case. It's a sort of abstruse philosophical problem with no benefit. But only because, as far as I'm concerned, obviously this might be the way that the other ones we get, the whole concept of God is just that. It's an abstruse philosophical game played to create little riddles like this, which can sometimes be solved within their own weird little contexts, like Plato's God.
He's had so long. That's patience, man.
That's right. Basically, I just wanted to ask if you guys could discuss the intriguing correlation between existential thinkers and them being bearded men.
Is that a joke?
Everyone here is asking questions about Islam because we've all got a beard and living and stuff.
I'm not sure it's an existential question, but it's an interesting cultural question. There has been across cultures a long tradition of men. It's very, I find, a very interesting question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Why do men?
You have a beard as well.
Why do traditions come with religion? Is that?
No, it's saying why existential thinking relates to people having a beard.
Yeah, so what's the connection between thinking that God exists and...
Let me answer that. I got something in my head.
I think there's an interesting sociological and psychological question there. It's a tendency that is remarked upon. I think it is probably real to some extent but it's one of those things that gets reinforced. People say the same things. People often say, like, oh, you can go to a meeting of humanists, they're all bearded men in sandals. And sometimes you go, and sometimes that's true. But I think it's one of those things that there's a sort of it's a small correlation in terms of Greek sages or philosophers from the last sort of couple of hundred years in Europe or something. And because of that, it then exaggerates itself. It's just like why the hippies wear certain types of scarves. Well, it just accumulates as a cultural thing. I dread to think it's some deeper psychological thing, like we're trying to hide something. Therefore, we spend lots of time alone thinking about stuff and reading. But maybe it's that a little bit, I don't know. I think it sort of thins out my face and makes me a bit less fat.
I know the wisdom behind that question now. You need to make... I think there's wisdom behind it. Anyway, and my point is, see, once someone asked a guy with a beard, and they said, I think it was on the tube in London. You don't have tubes here, right? No. And he said, why do you have a beard? And then the guy responded, what's good? A lion that has mane. Yeah. But the point is, obviously, Muslims, we have this tradition that we believe in loving the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him. And this love manifests itself by emulating the Prophet. And the Prophet had a beard. If the Prophet had dreadlocks, I would have dreadlocks. Now you may think that's a bit shallow, but I think it's quite profound because, you know, how do you manifest love? It's not only internal feeling, but it's an external feeling. It's an external manifestation. And this is the thing unique about Islamic thought, is that, you know, it doesn't take internal traits and forget external features. It brings them both together. Take the concept of haya, and I'm talking about Karate Kid, yeah? Talking about haya in Arabic means modesty, yeah? And in modesty, we say, look, take the female dress, for example, to demystify that. You know, some women would adopt a hijab, the covering of the hair, loose clothing, etc. Men would cover the navel to the knees. And that is an external manifestation of modesty. But the ulama, the scholars say, the external manifestation is only a manifestation. For example, a beard, even goats have beards. Yeah? So intrinsically, there's nothing special about it. It has to be linked to the internalization of it. So that's why you have, and this is a social Muslim thing, that's why you have some women, sisters, who don't cover their hair, but they have more modesty than ones that do. Do you see? I'm not saying that, okay, that might get me in trouble, but the point I'm trying to say is, we know it's an obligation to cover your hair. I don't want to be seen as someone who's extremely modern in that view. I'm not. It's an obligation, it's a classical view, X, Y, Z. However, the point I'm trying to make though is we need to be more deep in our tradition. Our tradition, we're not legal that way. We're not legalists. Yeah, we're spiritual human beings as well. So this is why in Islam your actions are not judged by only the external feature, by two other features. Ikhlas, which means sincerity. Now what does sincerity lie? In the heart. So how do you deal with the heart? The spiritual tools that you have, the conceptual tools that we have in the Islamic tradition to break down arrogance and ego, etc. to form a true natural human being. And the other point is the action that you do has to be in line with Islam. You see? So it's interesting, it's existential, because when you ask the question, what does it mean to be a human being? Am I wearing a beard just because I'm just a social product? No. Am I wearing a beard because of political pressure? Am I wearing a beard for all these reasons? No. Am I wearing a beard because it's cool? Yeah, you have all the magazines here. What does it mean to be cool? You have to look like this guy over here, right? MashaAllah. So the point is, the point I'm trying to say, right, is that, you know, it is an existential question, because what does it mean to be you? Why do you do things? And I think from the Islamic narrative, it's quite empowering, because it says you shouldn't be a product of society, you shouldn't be a product of political pressure, you shouldn't be a product of the economic, social conditions. There's an amazing book written by, I forgot his name, Eric Fromm, yeah, the psychoanalyst and the social theorist, right? It's an amazing book, and he talks about that we are a product of socio-economic circumstances. Even Vivian Baird discusses this about social constructionism, saying if you have a competitive society, you're going to get behavioral traits that lie along the spectrum of competition. If you live in a liberal society, we're going to have slightly more atomistic or individualistic tendencies. Yeah, and that's so true when you study social theory and you study human beings in different societies. Yeah, you have more individualistic from one end and more communitarian on the other end, etc., etc. And that's so true. So that means, what does it mean to be you? So I think what the Quran tells you to do is try and transcend this by understanding the underlying foundations for these thoughts in the first place. So in Islam, we discuss something which is quite profound, called Tawheed, which is the oneness of God, which is the essence of the religion. And Tawheed meaning God is one. And what does that mean? That means He's one, that you single Him out solely for worship. You don't worship statues or anything else. There's no intermediary. Also, you single Him out in His oneness with regards to who He is. When we say He's merciful, we have an appreciation, but that mercy transcends a human anthropomorphic version of mercy. This is why when the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, said, you know, God, He loves you more than mothers love their children. Now, the biggest love we can imagine is the love of a mother to her child. But we can't really understand any greater love than that, can we? This is what the Prophet described it that way, to say, look, view who God is from that oneness, anti-anthropomorphic perspective. Also, we understand God's oneness via who He is as the Lord, that He's the sole creator, He's the sole provider, etc., etc. So this is the essence of the oneness of God. And this is the underlying foundation of our creed. So don't be a reaction to social circumstances. Rather, allow social circumstances to react to you by your thinking, so you can examine the underlying foundations of a particular society and find out if you've got good reasons to believe in them. This is very profound. This is why you have some Muslims looking really weird in Western society, because we want to be a product of reason, not a product of society itself. And this is a thing that we all need to discuss as human beings, because our society, not atheists or liberals or Muslims, our society, our great society, there's some problems. We have social fragmentation and breakdown. You know, we have a lot of problems. For example, especially when it comes to women. For example, about 65% of 4-year-olds to 11-year-olds, they are defining themselves on how they look. That's a disgrace. That is a disgrace. And a lot of social commentators and psychologists are saying, look, the problem is the media is what defines what makes you feel good, how you dress, how you look. Our economic system is based on that. If you read the works of Professor Lauren Coran, yeah, but probably Muslim, yeah, but from Maryland University, discusses that not greed, but this emphasis of always consuming is actually the driving force behind a capitalist society and makes it a good, and makes our economy moving forward. So in essence, greed is the foundation of our economic theory in a way. So I need to get iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6. This almost becomes a defining feature of who we are. Now you may think this is a caricature of Western society. It may be. But there are a lot of problems that we all need to deal with. This is why a lot of commentators are more addressing a more communitarian critique of liberalism and capitalism. Find out some certain solutions that are really practical and real. Look, let's be really real here, yeah? We want people to believe in God. We want people to believe in Santa Claus, especially the youth. They don't even believe in themselves, man. They don't even believe in their own selves. And in Islam, self-knowledge is foundational. If you don't know who you are, you don't know where you belong. You don't even know how to connect with God. So the problem is, we are living in a society that's constructed a human being that they don't even know what it means to be a human being. And especially when it comes to our youth, we failed our youth. Like if you read the Children's Society report published in 2009, I read it to a secular non-Muslim school. I didn't start crying because most of the children, they didn't know what made them happy. They didn't know. And also, their priorities wasn't money, education, and having housing. There were other priorities, but as parents in the West, we always concentrate on what? Money, education, and housing. But the kids don't want that. They want something more profound. So this report, I suggest everyone to read it. And it's done by a mainstream organization. It's very powerful. And it's something that we need to address as practical human beings. I think both sides of the discussion would agree that we need to solve our problems.
Right, social problems are just transcendent problems to the problem of religion itself or society.
Also, and so, we don't really have something to make about also being as well. So I was basically sort of going to say that the fact that we exist and have minds, sort of thing, gives us value. The universe is around us deterministic. We're here for a reason, we're here for previous events. And because of the fact of our existence, we are then able to give our existence meaning. We have the opportunity to give ourselves meaning. And I'm saying it is the existence of opportunity which would be absent if we didn't exist. I think that gives our life meaning. What is your opinion on that existential?
I agree with you. You can give yourself meaning, yeah. But it doesn't mean your existence has meaning. You see, the underlying reason for your existence doesn't mean there's a meaning.
Yeah, that's the ultimate.
That's the point. That's the ultimate point. So I do agree with you. Yes, you can give us a meaning. I can give us a meaning in life that I want to basically write a book. I want to be a human being that brings human beings together, creates cohesion in society. I want to be a human being that basically, fight without weapons, of course, fights against Zionist atrocities in Israel, for instance, hypothetically. Also, I want to basically create world peace. I'm giving myself purpose and meaning. That's true. I can do that.
Self-determination was the ultimate.
That's fine. You're giving that to yourself. That's just fine. But it doesn't mean there's an ultimate meaning for your life. It doesn't matter if you exist or not, really. Because see, from a naturalistic perspective, we are technically just a rearrangement of molecules. We are matter, aren't we? Carbon, etc., etc. That's what we are, fundamentally. And naturally, that's it. That's the logical implications of that. Now, if we give it a meaning, like some kind of metaphysical meaning or a higher meaning, that meaning itself has come from just a human being that's just a set of molecules anyway. So we're just justifying a set of molecules with a set of molecules. So that's what I'm saying about the logical implications of naturalism or atheistic worldview on the self, on who you are as a human being. But you can give yourself meaning, you can give yourself purpose, of course. Like the existentialists, they said you give yourself purpose, it's a black canvas, you give yourself meaning. All I was saying was there's no ultimate meaning from that perspective. But many people argue, well, I don't believe there's ultimate meaning. Well, that's fine. That's not, well, it wasn't a main crux of my argument. It's more of an existential point, meaning, you know, if there's a bombing in Iraq and people died, then what does that really mean ultimately? Well, it just means it's a rearrangement of molecules. That's what it means naturalistically. From a humanist perspective, it's like, okay, that's really sad, fellow feeling, we're bad. But where your feelings come from, my friend? They come from molecules. That's what they are. You see my point? So if you render it from a reductionist kind of scientific naturalistic perspective, that's all it is. But I agree, we could live in a self-delusion and say, no, human beings are so special. It's true, it's really bad, it's, you know, we're more agents. But where does your morality come from? It's a set of molecules. The feelings, molecules. Everything's molecules.
Yeah, I agree with some of this. I think it's just too reductionist. I think it eliminates the fact that different rearrangements.
It's upsetting, isn't it? It is upsetting.
Different arrangements are not just going to recognize the phenomenon. They need the mind. I think the mind would create that.
What does that mean? What does the mind mean for you?
It's the mind.
What does that mean? Is that a brain or is that a mind?
In organisms, the ability to possess consciousness, the mind.
Oh, but if you believe in that, that means it's a very interesting view because naturalists have moved away from the dualistic view on mind.
Dualism. Mind is also materialist, but its mind is unique from the universe as well.
Oh, so you believe in the mind, right?
So not in sort of.
Is that mind material? Is it material?
It's material, but it's still unique. Like it's not saying.
Okay, well if it's material, then you just still render it fundamentally just to yourself. Molecules. For me, I believe the mind is something immaterial. I would propose a dualistic view of consciousness. Do you see?
I think we just sort of.
But do you see my point? When we reduce the best, even in science, what we do, we reduce things. Yeah, we reduce them to the fundamental components, and things like emotions, things like feelings, things like morals from a naturalist perspective are just, if you reduce them, they're just molecules. That's what I'm saying. Now it doesn't mean now we can't give molecules something special. All you'll be doing is using molecules to justify molecules, or molecules to attribute meaning to molecules. That's what it is. That's how I see it. If someone has got an alternative approach, maybe talk to me about it, and I may be convinced. But fundamentally, that's what it means.
Just to expand on that point, actually, it shows us that you meaning what you meaning that you self-determination. But you can wake up the next morning and say, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be a doctor and help God knows how many people. And then you can wake up the next morning and say, well, no, actually, I don't want to do that anymore. So you can change your personal meaning every other day. You can change that, but your ultimate meaning of life is completely different.
Okay, and I think that's the point at which humanism gets confused about. I don't understand the purpose of an ultimate purpose or the meaning of an ultimate meaning, because it seems to be sort of saying, okay, we all agree we can make meanings in our lives, we can make purposes in our lives, worldly things about what we value, what we want to achieve, what we want to do, whether we want to make people happy and build civilization or destroy it and make people sad. I think those are the real. No, you don't want to do that. Those are the real.
Well, he's French.
When we then add on to that and say, okay, well now, in addition, what does that all mean without an ultimate meaning? What is it? What ultimate meaning? If God has this ultimate purpose? I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. In 1,000 years, we'll all come together in a big human pyramid, and the person on the hat will wear a big hat, and we'll all go, that was it. That was what we were meant to achieve. But we have no idea what this means. No, and every religion is that we disagree over. And if it even says anything, we talk about saying God gives an ultimate meaning. Okay, well, when we talk about worldly meanings, we say things like we want to achieve it, we want to work towards world peace, or whatever it is. And then when it comes to God's ultimate meaning, we rightly say, well, we have no idea what it would be. No idea what it is. Can't flesh it out in any way, and no idea what this ultimate purpose is. So I don't really understand how it adds anything to our moral lives. Our moral lives are about real things that happen between us that we want to do and achieve. I don't understand why, no one can say what this purpose is. Or if you do, then it just is something that differs from religion to religion, and indeed from one religious speaker to another. So in a way, it just seems to be yet another type of very worldly purpose. A bunch of molecules, if that's what you want to call us, stating a yet another worldly purpose. It's just that you called it an ultimate purpose without actually saying what that means or achieves.
I mean, I think it does affect your moral view, to be honest. I think it's very an outdated humanist cliche.
But what does? What is it? What is the ultimate purpose?
But that's regardless of the
Big
point.
question.
That's regardless of the point. The point we're trying to say is, look, the communists, what did the communists do? Yeah? And the communists fundamentally were materialists, right? They reduced the human being to its reality according to naturalism. That's not true. They said, you are just a rearrangement of molecules. So when the Christians were killed, 6 million Christians were killed under Stalin, what did some of these torturers say? Communist torturers that as a natural consequence of a naturalistic worldview saying we're just this. What did they say? They said, ha, we've got no accountability, there's no moral driving force, we're just going to die and becomes worm's meat, so I'm getting away with this. No. If you read the accounts of Christians being tortured under communism or other religious people, you say the human project has failed. Yeah? It's sad. So the point I'm trying to make is, these ideas do have implications. So we can't just, have our cake and eat it from that perspective. Also, in Cyprus, these type of people who had these ideas, they used to sleep with their daughters. Because they used to say, she's just matter, I own her. What's the big deal? And that was a reality. That was Stalin. What did Stalin say? Something very interesting about the human being. He said, look, at the end of the day, we're just matter, aren't we? I know we can get upset by this, yeah? But obviously we're upset with this. It doesn't mean humanists are like this. It doesn't mean, religious people, just because Muslims may be doing bad things, therefore all Muslims are like this. I understand that. But we have to trace it back to a thought. And it just logically follows that if you do believe just in a purely naturalistic view on the human being, then why are you saying that person's wrong? Because that's reality for you. And that's my point.
I think that people who have an ultimate, they claim to believe in an ultimate purpose or an ultimate meaning, are just as capable as committing atrocities. There doesn't seem to be any protection against regimes that do bad things, individual people that do bad things, people that fall into human catastrophe. I think it is relevant to the question of what is this ultimate purpose? Simply stating it that we have one is it's like saying, the human values that we have in the world that exist with us, they're one thing, but we need an ultimate value or an ultimate morality or an ultimate this. Unless there's some functioning philosophical component there that says, this is why it's important, this is why you need it, then it just has no philosophical content. It's just an empty concept, way outside of the world, outside of all these things that matter when we actually deal with each other on a day-to-day basis, our human interactions and thoughts and feelings. Why is this nebulous, ghostly concept of an ultimate purpose that can't be stated and can't be described and apparently that's not what it is? How is that helpful to us? That's the sort of and I know that sounds a very harsh thing to say, but I'm trying to sort of emote. Because often, atheists are talking in terms of evidence, this and evidence. I'm trying to say, that it's the feeling that I have is like, why are you taking away where the value really is and referring to this thing that I don't know what it is, this ultimate purpose. Why we can't just see values and purposes in the world as what actually matters rather than this purpose with no name.
Well, it has a name, but there'll be another discussion. For example, in an Islamic perspective, our purpose is to worship God. That's the fundamental purpose. It's a unique concept that builds other things in our life. It forms a worldview. So, worshipping God means things like to love Him, to serve Him, and to worship Him, and to know Him. And from that, we develop life. So that's the ultimate purpose for the Muslim. And you may say, how do you know that's true? Well, we'll say, we have good reasons to believe that's true because we believe it came from God. And we'll say, well, how do you know it came from God? We'll say, we have this book of the Quran. How do you know the Quran came from God? We'll say, well, we've got good reasons to believe it's a signpost to the transcendent. But that's another debate for instance, we believe that we can't find naturalistic reasons for the occurrence of the Quran and many statements that it's made, because when we go to nature and we exhaust all logical possible combinations of explanations, we can't produce anything like the Quran. And we could see this from a linguistic, historical, scientific, and sociological point of view. I could give you some of these examples, but that's probably for another debate. But we have our reasons, you see. So that's how it becomes ultimate, because we could attribute to the divine.
Very good. We'll wrap it up here. There's definitely no ubiquitous concept for universal.
Okay, good.
Concept that we will all agree upon. It's too bad. I would love everybody to agree on the same thing. So we'll just have to end it here, and maybe take a poll again.
There must be something. There must be something. But we all like pretty much everyone ate a pizza, right?
Yeah.
It's not like good at pizza. It's good. Okay, say something. Yeah. Okay, good. I did my job. Anyway, so let's just take a poll again. Although I'm pretty sure nobody will change their mind. Do you agree with that statement? How many people agree with that statement now?
That's more. There were like one.
There's no more.
There was like one. Yes.
Anyway, people that don't necessarily agree or disagree with that statement. Yeah, it's just some skeptics in here. There's good people doubting it. It's good. It's a good thing. And disagree with that statement.
We can't hear what you say.
Sorry. Disagree. Yeah, you disagree. Okay. So the social pressure makes people change mind. Anyway, let's just wrap this up. Thanks both speakers. Thanks to everyone for being here, and we hope to bring that up again and do another debate like this. So I thought.